Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes of public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness Initiative. This episode is sponsored by the Finest Service Organization, a provider of line of duty death loan protection through many of our POCUA institutions. I am Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I have a really interesting and intriguing guest today. It's our first, to my knowledge, ever retired U.S. Secret Service agent, and I'm really happy that it's a woman because we're going to get some even better insight because, our guys, just want to talk about catching bad guys, but we're going to go into some real deep stuff here. But let me tell you about her. Her name is Melanie Lentz. She was a Secret Service agent for about a decade or so. She is also the author of a couple of books that we're going to talk about. One is Agent Innocent, How the Secret Service Changed My Life. And another is called Advanced Work, and I want to talk about that as well. She's doing some amazing things right now, such as working as a blogger for Psychology Today. She's running a business, Training by Mel. God knows I need some training. She's also an expert swimmer. And I saw this Krav Maga practitioner, which means that she can kick my ass. So I'm glad that we're about 2,000 miles away. Melanie, welcome to the show.
What's up? Thanks for having me, Ken. Glad to be here. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun. We already had fun before I pressed the record button. Hopefully it won't be like a couple of episodes in my other show where we have so much fun and then I press the record button and there are no laughs. So I'll try to remedy that today. But as I mentioned, you were a U.S. Secret Service agent for about a decade. What was that like, particularly to be a professional woman in what's obviously a very male-dominated profession?
Right. Yeah, the Secret Service didn't start hiring female agents until the early 1970s. So even today, when I became an agent in 2007, there was about one female to every 9 or 10 males, and it's still pretty close to that today. So yeah, definitely a heavily male dominated occupation. And to couple it up there, as if I wasn't already the outlier, I was also 22 when I got hired, which was at the time the youngest female Secret Service agent. So I kind of had a double whammy of, coming from behind a little bit. So when I became an agent, it was very obvious that, kind of that you stand in formation for the first time as one of these doesn't belong, it's obviously me. I have a funny story about early on in training, and this story kind of sums up how the first part goes. So, you get to training and they have you line up in formation, which me, no military, no law enforcement. First time, they call out 6 and 4. So they want, 6 people, 4 lines, and everybody else knew what that meant except for me. So I caused a few push-ups right off the bat. So got my act together, and we stand in line, and this instructor starts pacing back and forth, very dramatically like the movies. And he says, there's that saying about everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And he said, but you may not have ever been punched in the face. And he looks right at me, and I'm like, oh boy. And oh boy, here it comes. What did I get myself into? But he said, but today you're going to know what it feels like. So they get us all, get our, boil and bite mouthpieces in that I had never done before. So I had it wrong, but we learned. We had a lot of learning. And they paired me up with another guy in my class because I'm almost 5'9", so I was a little bit taller than the 2 other females in my class who were about the same height. So I was with one of the guys, and we're standing there, and they kind of give the go, and they say, you're gonna, spar a little bit. I'd never done this before, so
there wasn't any sparring in all those swim meets you did, before you got to the Secret Service. Nobody hit each other. You just jump in the water.
Yeah, you just jump in the water. It's a very, it's the introvert sport. You're just following the black line by yourself, and. But anyways, yeah, so they line us up, they give the go, and they say, spar a little bit. Well, my partner clocked me. Rang my bells. But we had, I had the mouth guard on. He didn't hurt me, but there's a joke the whole time through training that my ponytail kind of did this ripply thing as I, projected back, and I fought back. They said that was the thing, is that you got pissed, and so you started swinging poorly, but I fought back. And I remember thinking, he didn't have to hit me so hard. Like, they told us, be good actresses and actors in training, like, you make your partner look good and just aggressive enough to get the job done, but nobody needs to get hurt. So they give us a water break, and my colleague comes out and comes running down the hallway, and he's like, Melanie, I am so sorry. He said, I've never hit a woman in my life, and I did not want them to make me do it twice on the first day. And so I was, oh gosh, he wasn't going to do me any favors by going easy on me, but that was that sobering, like, hey, we are all equal here, and I better step it up and step it up quick. So yeah, gulp, what did I get myself into?
So you didn't do the girl thing and kick them in the balls and walk away? Or?
No, I learned that much later in Krav Maga.
Yeah. Here's how you do it quickly, and never mind.
Yeah.
So the real important question is, how many times have you and your colleagues watched In the Line of Fire?
Oh, we watched that movie. Oh, yes. Okay. So, the Secret Service has a dual mission. So they do the protection and investigations. They were actually started to combat counterfeit currency. Mm-hmm. So day one of the academy, the counterfeit investigation portion of the academy, that first day, they hit play. So we watched that scene from not In the Line of Fire. I'm thinking To Live and Die in LA. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I know which one you're talking. Yeah. We'd watched both, but To Live and Die in LA has that scene where they're making the counterfeit with the traditional, printing press and the plates. And so they hit play on that movie. But yes, we did watch that movie, the other ones as well. But yeah, so I think people think a lot of times that it's that sexy career that you're constantly, earpiece and, the big bulging biceps and tailored suit with, everything looking crisp. But, the real, and I'm sure many law enforcement and public service, people in that line of work knows that it's a little ugly, and you're living out of a suitcase, and that suit was real wrinkly about 5 minutes before you came into work, so.
Yeah, it's funny, this is off the rails a little bit, but we're having fun, so I'm gonna roll with it. And for those watching or listening, In the Line of Fire is the one with Clint Eastwood. To Live and Die in LA was with Willem Peterson and Willem Dafoe, if I remember it right. And the irony is, I just watched To Live and Die in LA not too long ago again, because my wife never saw it. And I said, you know what? It's practically all filmed not too far away from where we live. We live in Long Beach, California, and most of it was filmed in San Pedro. She even made the joke it should be called To Live and Die in San Pedro, because there's hardly anything in Los Angeles. Right. But anyhow, a very good friend of mine, a guest, former guest on this show, and one of our public safety podcast partners, Christy Warren from Firefighter Deconstructed, a retired firefighter, says that you can't even watch the commercials for 911 and 911 Lone Star because they're so stupid and unrealistic. Did you find the same thing with those movies as a Secret Service agent?
Oh my gosh, yes. They do a pretty good job when you get towards the end of the application process of telling you what you can really expect. But nobody told me that, during like a presidential campaign year, that, for example, you'd be doing an event for some candidate or VP candidate in Jacksonville, Florida, and finish it up and get a text message saying, hey, you're headed to Milwaukee right as the weather turns, so I'm sweating my butt off in one place, and then the next day I'm doing something random up in, someplace a little colder. It's definitely not how the movies make us look much cooler than it actually ever was.
Well, to get into a deeper subject, you mentioned to me before we started recording that you had to deal with some pretty heavy stuff in law enforcement. You mentioned that you dealt with child porn and getting a lot of those criminals off the street. Tell us a little bit more about that and how that affected you.
Right. Yeah. When you become a Secret Service agent, you typically want to protect people. And that's what I wanted to do. I never in a million years thought I'd find myself on a task force. It was an electronic crimes task force. And so when you work with other agencies, we had LADA, CHP, a lot of other agencies that we worked with in that task force. So you're going to come across or work cases that maybe aren't part of your agency's specific core mission. And unfortunately, a lot of the caseload in that squad when I was there was child pornography cases. And I had never seen it, never thought it, never wanted to, never, this was something I was very ill prepared for. And I have a whole lot of respect for local law enforcement, especially that works, child sex crimes on a daily basis, because after about 2 years of it, I asked to leave the squad. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was rough because, and everybody in public service and law enforcement, you have this switch when you go into work. Sometimes your emotions and something that would normally repulse you outside of work, you have to hold it together to stop it or to do your work, do your job. And so I kind of had to, I credit that squad with kind of teaching me that, to just show up to work and do your job. And at first, it's so satisfying when you stop somebody who is manufacturing or distributing this stuff on the internet. But then the problem is after a while, you realize that there are 20 more cases to replace that one that you just tried to fix, And so I think I got very frustrated, and I know this is common amongst law enforcement. You get a little bit, I'm not really making a difference, and I'm seeing these awful things and having to go, write search warrants and see this stuff and be able to present it to a U.S. attorney's office, and it's rough. And then you just go home and pretend it's not, they always say don't bring your work home with you. So then you just turn it off and act normal. And it felt weird that you get into a groove where you're capable of doing that. And it was about shortly after I had gotten married, and spoiler alert, now ex-husband, but my husband at the time was a local police officer. And so we both got good at doing the same thing. So it was kind of this dysfunctional living separate lives, but we don't talk about it too much. It was difficult for me in law enforcement to go home and turn off the switch and just live normally. And I think that, our marriage had a lot of problems from the very get-go. And so when you see this crap at work and he sees, all what he sees at work in Southern California, as you can imagine, you think, oh, my problems are so minimal, like you minimize and you dismiss. You say, oh my gosh, this is so trivial compared to what I've got to do at work in the morning. Or what, you have an issue with this with me? Well, that's stupid because look at what I had to do today. And so I don't think I navigated it well. Obviously, it affected me a lot, just working that nature of cases, but it was also at a time where I needed to be addressing some stuff in my personal life, and I didn't because I minimized what was going on there.
Now a word from our sponsor, the Police Officers Credit Union Association. Coming this October 2021 is the Public Safety Business Summit in Savannah, Georgia, a program specifically created for organizations that serve first responders. What you will experience is a high level of networking and collaboration among like-minded leaders who are in the business of serving first responders. What you won't get are a series of boring lectures with no interactivity, ridiculous golf outings that are only appealing to a few attendees, or a couple of retreaded subjects that you can hear at any credit union league event that are just thrown into the curriculum. We offer an engaging agenda where attendees even help to determine the content during the actual conference based on their unique needs. If you run a business, a credit union, or a nonprofit that specifically serves first responders, then the Public Safety Business Summit is for you. For more information, go to www.policecreditunions.com or call 331-300-9889. We hope to see you in Savannah this fall. Mentioned several times on this show, I've never been a first responder, but have the utmost respect for anybody that's worked in public safety, healthcare, anything related to that. I've never had that experience, so I just have to live vicariously and honor the people that do. But my wife and I have kind of a running joke that that public safety professionals usually marry other public safety professionals, and I always wonder exactly how that works. I've had some couples on shows that I did that, were a firefighter and a police officer, and a police officer. Our running joke at home is, hey, you know what? I was talking to a new police officer for the work I was doing. You know who he's married to? A nurse. Oh, that never happens. And I think part of it is you kind of gravitate to somebody else in the same or similar profession because they understand. And sometimes that works really well at home, I've seen
Mm.
from the outside, and other times not so much. Because as you say, if you're both going to kind of clam up and not tell each other what's going on, and using each other as a springboard, it causes more problems than
Right.
not. Was that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was. And when you're in those kind of occupations, you're often working opposite schedules. So a lot of it is you just
Yeah.
haven't seen each other. And so when you do, you just, the last thing you want to do is deal with the crap you've been putting off. Sometimes he'd have midnight or graveyards and I'd have days, and then we'd flip flop as soon as the other got the other person's schedule. So yeah, it definitely was that. It was just the communication lacked. And I always say kind of law enforcement in general is one of those occupations where you have to become an expert at diffusing tough situations. Even as a Secret Service agent, you have somebody getting, hostile at a checkpoint because they think they should have access and they don't, aren't on the list or whatever. You have to kind of de-escalate, and that kind of, you almost are good at doing that in your personal life. Law enforcement enforces the law and the judicial system works out the solution and the consequences, so it was almost like we did that in our relationship. We just diffused and then hoped it worked itself out.
Yeah. Yeah, it obviously in one way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, you dealt with it by getting divorced. I hope
Yeah.
that worked out for the best for
Mhm.
both of you. Yeah, how you mentioned that you also dealt with depression and so forth. I don't know if it was
Right.
related to the marriage and the job, or other stimulants or whatever the hell it was. I'm not using the right language on that.
Yeah.
But how did you deal with some of this? How did you eventually find a way to kind of get past some of this?
Right. Well, I did it poorly. As I've gotten older, I've gotten
Yeah.
better about
We
this.
we all, almost
Yeah.
all of us do, so
Yeah.
don't worry
I
about
just
it.
say I was 50, I was 50 shades of messed up back then. And I'm, 49, 48. So I'm still working on it now.
Yeah.
No, but for me, I didn't realize how prominent depression is in law enforcement, and that it's something that you don't talk about. And I think as a woman, I didn't talk about it or didn't address it in my life because I thought that would be a perceived weakness, that I was the tough girl. I excelled at my job and didn't handle, I said yes to work and no to my personal life.
Yeah.
And that pattern just continued for most of my career. My first year out of training was the 2008 presidential campaign. Which is, Obama McCain
Right.
campaign, which was absolutely nuts. So I was on the road a lot right out of training. And I just developed those habits where, this is a job that essentially is telling you your life is not as important as somebody else's because you're designed to protect them. You're the sacrifice if needed. That's kind of the vibe of that kind of line of work. And so you just kind of, like I said, continue to dismiss and stuff. And I loved my job. That was the thing, is I had complete validation and my identity was Special Agent Melanie Lentz. And I was proud of that title and I loved it. Typical, type A, I'm doing something with my life. And as I got through my career, there is this point in an agent's career where you're supposed to move to DC because you'd go into the field. I was Los Angeles for a while. You learn the ropes, you travel as needed for protection assignments, and then you go to a permanent protection detail, whether that's the president, vice president, or a former president and a spouse. And
Sure.
so it was around the time where it's my turn, my class's turn to make that big move to protection. And there's some stuff that had happened that showed the marriage was in trouble. And I had a really hard time accepting that. And, I met this person when I was 17. My whole adult life involved this person, and to realize that it might not, it was pretty rough. And he was a local police officer. So that meant moving to DC was hard for him. So we had to have some put off conversations. And, I got to the point where I know now, I didn't know then, that depression runs in my family. And we had never talked about it, whether that's a generational thing. I don't know. Some that, those kinds of things were secret back in the day. So I think I was kind of the one that started talking about it, thankfully. But it got to the point where I was so down about the marriage that I was having a hard time getting out of bed to go to work. And that was very unlike me, because I would just turn it off. That switch was on all the time. And I remember, when you get hired at many occupations, you get this pamphlet called the Employee Assistance Program. We're here for you. Call this number. There's some frayed poster in the break room somewhere with this 800 number on there. And you think, your ego says, I got it together. That will never apply to me.
Right.
But I can tell you, I got desperate enough to where I contacted the Employee Assistance Program, and I thought I was going to be met with a whole lot of judgment. And I was so scared to make that call. But I will say that was probably one of my strongest moments as a woman, as a human, as a special agent, because what I thought was going to be judgment was met with, it was an encouragement. You did the right thing.
Yeah.
And they said, Melanie, who do you want to stand next to on the job? Do you want to stand next to, your divorce rate is 80%. So you're not the only one dealing with this.
Right.
So do you want to stand next to somebody in a crisis situation who's also going through a divorce like you, but is handling it poorly, turning to alcohol or whatever other coping mechanisms? Do you want to stand next to that person? Or do you want to stand next to the person who's also going through a divorce, who is taking the measures to deal with it in healthier ways and move on and still be effective on the job? Who do you want to stand next to? Now, of course, you want to stand up with the person who's coping with their personal life better so that it doesn't affect their job. And so their perspective was not one of judgment. It was, I'm surprised more of you don't call. And so I don't think a lot of us forget that we have that option on the job. You get that pamphlet at hiring, but you never take advantage of it. And that's what they would tell me is many law enforcement agencies offer 10 free counseling sessions a year. And they said they go unused most of the time. So, me admitting I'd never been to a therapist or counseling or a psychiatrist or anything before, but, asking for help was something that was definitely a step in the right direction for me. The other step that was also a source of contention at home was my husband didn't want to move.
Yeah.
And I knew that us moving would be the end of the marriage. And right around that time, there was an opening at former First Lady Nancy Reagan's detail, and she was still in Los Angeles in her 90s. So it was essentially driving Miss Daisy by then.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably a
gosh.
pretty coveted assignment.
Yeah, they say it's the cushiest job in the Secret Service. So
who's going to try to assassinate a 90-year-old woman?
Not a soul. Yeah. So I made a career suicide choice in the middle of all this, to go to Nancy Reagan's detail instead of going to DC with my classmates, which is what I really deep down wanted to do, is do the career thing. I loved my job. I loved my job a whole lot. And so I went to Nancy Reagan's detail, insanely resentful towards my husband, angry at this sacrifice that I had to make in order to save a marriage that didn't make it anyway. So it was like shortly after I went to Nancy Reagan's detail, papers were filed. So it was, if I was going to be by myself, I should have just gone to DC. So I went to Nancy Reagan's detail very, very angry. But, sometimes you're just right where you need to be when you need to be there, because in the big office like Los Angeles, you're going to get big career advice. Their advice about anything involves your career. Go to DC, you'll promote right out of there. You'll go to whatever field office you want afterwards. You'll be a boss, you'll blah, blah, blah. But when I went to Nancy Reagan's detail, every one of the other agents on that detail had made that choice because of their personal life, one way or another. One guy's daughter was very ill, and so she was seeing a specialist for her condition at UCLA. So moving was going to be hard for them, right. For whatever, child custody or something that kept them there for their personal lives. And so when I was going through arguably the roughest time of my life, trying to keep it together, I went to an assignment that was keeping me off the road a lot more because Nancy Reagan wasn't traveling. So I had time to see the counselors and to have a more predictable schedule. But I was also being given advice that looked beyond the Secret Service, which is something I hadn't done since 2007. I just saw the job. And so I think that decision was the best one. Career move I made, it was a career suicide move. And after Nancy Reagan passed away the next year, I ended up leaving. Mm-hmm. But I think I had been denying the depression for a long time. When you start talking about stuff and you start asking you about symptoms or how you cope with things, you realize I've been doing this a long time, and I know I have coworkers that do the same thing, that have the same issue. And so when I started kind of admitting it, when I, and telling people, obviously you have to report this stuff to your bosses when you're, seeing somebody for, any sort of mental health kind of stuff. And so they knew, but then there was other coworkers that said, well, maybe I need to reach out to the Employee Assistance Program. And so I think I started a conversation, scary conversation, but it ended up being a very productive conversation at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that story. I've not being a first responder or in the Secret Service. Unfortunately, I dealt with some of the same things you did, so I unfortunately I didn't have to live that vicariously.
Yeah, yeah.
But from my own personal story, there's plenty of people. You walk into one of those AA groups and you think for the first time, I did so much bad crap, and I'm a terrible person. And then you sit there for 10 minutes and talk to a couple people and listen to a few stories, like, wow, what I did wasn't so bad.
Yeah,
Or somebody, or my favorite one, or somebody tells you, it's like, you woke up in an alley? That's nothing. I woke up in jail. So
yeah.
but
Nice.
my point to that, and I've stressed this on the show a number of times, and Sean Douglas, who we met through from Life
Yes,
Transformation Radio, has
yes.
said this a number of times, which is reach out to somebody.
Right,
The number of us have all been there. There's really nothing new that
right.
anybody's going to talk
Exactly.
about. So whether it's EAP or some kind of outside group, or even just talking to somebody that may not be a partner or a family member, but somebody that you trust, reach out to
Right.
somebody. And that's what you did, and it seemed to make a huge difference in your life.
Definitely. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
But let's segue a little bit, because I'm sure at least some of that experience was probably a motivation to a couple of the books that you wrote. In fact, you have two books. One, which is Agent Innocent, I mentioned at the beginning, and most recently, Advanced Work. And I understand that's an actual workbook. I may have that wrong, but tell us a little bit more about both of those publications.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was 22 when I got hired. So, you absolutely cannot take a 22-year-old with no life experience, much less law enforcement or military experience, and throw her in a group of other 23 of her, soon to be closest friends that have big biceps, military haircuts, and wear khaki shorts outside of training, and have there not be a little bit of comedy. So, luckily for me, I had a lot of really big brothers who helped me out a lot, and saw that I wanted it. I was really willing to do the work. And so, some of the best people I have ever met in my life are on that job. But, Agent Innocent is the name of my memoir. And the memoir shows kind of those funny and exciting experiences throughout my career, but with the underlying personal story. Because what I came out of Agent Innocent was, I say, your innocence is lost, in that line of work, essentially. But I learned a lot about the kind of woman and human in general that I want to be today, from this, naive 22-year-old that thought that she was going to be something. And, gosh darn it, I'm just this, innocent little thing walking in there. I've read all the books, and I'm book smart about the Secret Service, and the practical aspect had some, a little bit of a learning curve. Sure. But yeah. But I always say, as a female in law enforcement, I thought that I was just coming from behind, that I had to fit this mold to be a good agent. And what I found was there was a lot of things on the job that I could do that the guys couldn't do. Whether that was in a suspect interview, I could offer the more of a calming presence, or they just thought I was a naive idiot and I was actually observing and got them to talk. So I don't know. Sometimes that works too. I never looked the part, so I could blend in surveillance and stuff. So there was one funny story early on in my career, a counterfeit case of all things.
Yeah.
I was asked to help with the surveillance for a counterfeit case. And this was out in I was assigned to LA, but this counterfeit was getting passed in Las Vegas a lot. And so the suspects were kind of bouncing across, but the casinos in Vegas have very, very good counterfeit detection. And so the fact that it was getting passed, they don't want
to get ripped off. They probably have better detection than most police forces, but go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So the fact that it was a good quality, it wasn't somebody that just scanned their 20 and hit print on their inkjet printer, and it doesn't feel, it's the paint bleeds as soon as, but so it's actually decent quality. Well, we're watching this guy, a bunch of the suspects, and they all start bringing out suitcases, on the radio. We're like, I think they're about to go somewhere. And so we ended up on this, trail of agents following these people to Las Vegas from, the Inland Empire. So we had a lot. We didn't have anything with us. I Heart Vegas shirts were, coming up as we got there. We're like, we got to go get some clothes, guys. Yeah. But the thing is I was probably 24, 25 by then, but I still looked about 16. I always looked a lot younger than I was. And so I was able to blend, which is why I did a lot of surveillance. But we go in the casinos and we're following these guys around. I'm playing a couple slots here and there, just goofing off, keeping our eye on this to see where it's being passed and such. And I kept getting stopped by security, asking where my mother was. They kept saying, like, you've got to be 21 to play the slots, honey. Go, where's your parents? And I was like, and I showed my ID and they were like, oh, okay. They didn't know I was there for work related purposes, but right. It was funny is that, all those big brothers I talked about, they like to, harp on me about it, as you can imagine in that line of work. So every day when I showed up for my shift that week of surveillance, they'd say, little girl, you better go to the security office, get your wristband. And so I had to wear a wristband every day to go to work so they would leave me alone so I wouldn't lose our guy. So, I didn't fit in, but I fit in where I needed to sometimes. Right. And sometimes that's kind of a lot of women go in thinking they just need to be just like the dudes. And there are some things you all have. The nature of the job is it's same badge, same title, same pay, same standards. You have to be able to do certain things regardless of gender or size. There's things you have to be able to do. Right. And so my attitude was, well, I am going to be able to do all those things, but I don't have to be a dude to do it. I can still maintain, be a woman and still just, bust my hump to be able to do some of the physical things that were a little bit more challenging. But there were times when, hey, they couldn't do something I could do. And that was something is you kind of have to know, I have this to offer. You always have something to offer. People say, oh, I could never do that job. But yeah, you can. I mean, I'm 22 with no life experience and I could do it. And it was hard because I had a lot to learn. But yeah, there's countless stories of times where I was able to do something that those, big dudes couldn't do. Or just you have protectees that just have Secret Service all the time. So they don't get a moment's break. And so there was one time where there's this one guy in our squad called Eddie, or named Edward, but we called him Smooth Talking Eddie because he looked like he was part of a boy band. And he had this Southern drawl, so he could get anybody to talk. So me and Smooth Talking Eddie were two of the youngest agents in the office. And Jill Biden, of all people, now our first lady, but she was the second lady, so VP's wife at the time. Right. She wanted to go running on the beach. And we were up in Santa Monica in Venice Beach area. So you know where that's at from where you're at. And so I was tasked to go out to run with her because I would blend in. She just wanted a quiet run on the beach before her event. Like, I don't want a big to-do. Can I just have this, are you able to make this happen? Yeah. So who do they call? Me and Smooth Talking Eddie say, hey, you want to go scout out this little route? They said, well, she goes about this pace. She wants to go about this number of miles or whatever. So we scouted out, get ready to go. And, I've got that big belly band with my gun, my radio's flopping everywhere. But me and Smooth Talking Eddie said afterwards that, we always get teased about how young we look on this job, but there weren't any other agents in that office that could go for a run with the second lady and not a single soul recognized her because we were able to provide that experience, for that period of time. So yeah, there's always some place to offer. That's the advice I always give to women that say they want to go into that field is just, you have something to offer. You're just going to have to work hard to get the job because there are things you're going to have to be able to do. But,
so did you make that run with Joe Biden's wife with all that crap on?
Yeah. Well, there's actually, okay. All right. So there's actually a funny story about that so we're on this run. I'm out in front, I've got my thing. I'm calling out the intersections. I got my, wearing this long sleeve, big old shirt with, oversized to cover everything, but I've got my, radio. So we're running and be like, hey, passing this intersection. And the motorcade was kind of like shadowing us a little bit. And so we had these emergency egress points and stuff. Well, I'm jogging around, Smooth Talking Eddie's behind us. And so I kind of kept glancing back, make sure we got an eye on her. And I look back and Smooth Talking Eddie's gun had popped out of his belly band. He is juggling on the beach boardwalk. Mrs. Biden never saw a thing. And my eyeballs just got big and he's just like, just go. And so Smooth Talking Eddie had to get, he was always put together. Like we said, he looked like he was from a boy band. And Smooth Talking Eddie's juggling his gun behind Jill Biden, it just had popped out. So he's just doing one of these as I'm, walking by. But the things people don't know that happen behind the scenes.
Oh, sure.
It's comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've having worked with law enforcement for, I don't know, nearly 20 years. I've been told some of the best stories.
Oh, I bet.
Hopefully, obviously Eddie had the safety on when the gun popped
Oh,
out.
of course. Yeah. It wasn't one of those things where it was one of those where it's flopping out and you can see it in his shirt coming out. And so we were just, oh my gosh, Eddie, get it together. Come on. It's not our first day.
I feel like I have a vicarious career in law enforcement because I can't watch some of these shows. As many of the audience know, I cover true crime for Podcast Magazine, and so I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I watch a lot of true crime shows on television. Fortunately, my wife enjoys them too, and we'll be watching. Like a Dateline is a perfect example. And somebody will say, well, the gun just went off. Like, no. The guns don't just go off. No. All right. It's like, I'll show you. We'll go in the back. I'll grab the 357 and I'll just throw it up against the fence. And I'll do it 10 times. And I'll bet you that every single time it never goes off. Right. Guns don't just accidentally go off. No. All right. Right. Anyhow, I could keep talking to you for another hour, Melanie, and we didn't even get into the personal training stuff. Maybe we'll have a separate episode on that because on our soundness initiative, physical is one of our 4 pillars. But to kind of wrap up for now, where can our audience find you if they want to gain access to your books and buy like 18 copies for Christmas ahead of time, or have you speak, or even talk to you about personal training or anything? Where can they best find you out there?
Right. Well, my website is melanielentz.com. And so just my first and last name. The book is Agent Innocent, and that's the memoir, and that's available on Amazon, audiobook, Kindle, all those little varieties.
All that fun stuff.
Advanced Work is a workbook, is a 7-day workbook where my career ended kind of abruptly, where I knew I needed to start over to become somebody I was proud of. I lost my way clearly along the way somewhere. And so starting over, I realized I learned a lot about protecting myself inside and out by protecting others. And so advanced work is what a term in the Secret Service where when you're creating a security plan ahead of time, you go out to a site and you create that plan and the manpower and the logistics and all that stuff. That's called advanced work. And that's really the crux of protection as an agent. It's not just showing up in the motorcade. So I use kind of the concepts of advanced work to show how I kind of have my own personal security plan today. Whether that's habits I get into to protect myself physically or things that I do in terms of access control for the depression and inner protection. So it's kind of going through, and it's a workbook to kind of help. I share how I learned the lesson, and then how about you look at your life? Maybe there's something that you need to work on. So that just came out. I'm really excited about it. Probably more geared towards the younger audience, although I'm closer to 40 than 30 now. And I think that writing it made me kind of reevaluate some things in my current life. So that's available Amazon as well. And you have links to all that on my website. I'm at Melanie Lentz on Instagram or at Melanie Lentz author, but the Melanie Lentz one has the training and all that good stuff. So that's where you can reach me. Love to hear from everybody. I am booking speaking gigs for the fall now. So hit me up. It's media@melanielentz.com is the email for that.
Perfect. We'll make sure we put all of that in the show notes so they can find you easily. And your age is okay because I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40. So nice. and you still look like you could get stopped at the slot machine in Vegas. So
nice. Well, thanks. I just say I'm never getting old. But when I wake up in the morning and certain joints are a little crunchier than they used to be at 22, I'm reminded you're not quite that old anymore.
I am well aware.
Yeah.
Trust me. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for sharing so much good insight and being a lot of fun too. I really appreciated you taking the time.
No problem. It was awesome talking to you, and look forward to the next time, and all the best to you and all your projects, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. And thank you to all of you who have either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we'll be back with you next week with another awesome episode. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.